Today's episode is going to be on memory. So before we get started, just wanted to give a slight disclaimer. I am not an expert on the subject. I have ADHD. I like to research a lot about my own mental disorder, but take everything I say with a slight grain of salt. These are all my experiences and my thoughts on them. And that being said, ADHD is a very complicated yet well-researched mental disorder that varies from person to person. So basically, every time I say you, I'm really saying me. So just keep that in mind. So first I'm going to start with the difference between working memory or short-term memory and long-term memory. So me being a total nerd myself, I love computers. And I'm going to put this in the framework of computers, but try and make it easy enough to understand for everyone else too. Think of long-term memory as your storage, your hard drive. This is where you keep all your files. This is where you put things away, and when you turn your computer off and back on, they're all still there. It just gets kept wherever the heck you put it, although sometimes we can easily misplace things in there. And then the second kind is the working memory or the short-term memory. This is like the RAM in your computer, which is basically a highly volatile and really fast-acting version of storage. So as soon as you turn your computer off, it's gone. Nothing stored in memory gets saved in memory. It just deletes everything as soon as power's lost. But at the same time, it's really fast, so we don't have to dig around in our brain or through all our files to find something, and we can use what's in there for our open programs. So like, this is why, let's say if you're playing a video game, it doesn't have to dig for all the files every time you play. Like that's basically what a loading screen is. It's pulling all the files it needs into RAM, and then the RAM lets you use them while you're actively playing. So now the main thing about these kinds of memory and ADHD is that people with ADHD tend to have very short working memories, or I like to say we have very low RAM. So most computers probably have 8 to 16 gigs of RAM. We probably have like 2. As soon as we fill it up with just enough information, stuff starts to bleed out. That's why it's so hard to remember something while you're doing something else. Or like you're having a conversation with someone and suddenly what you were like, oh man, I have a great response to that, but I don't want to interrupt them. And then as soon as it's your turn to talk, you're like, what was the idea? I don't know what's happening. Or why when you're going around the house and you walk into a room and you're like, why am I here? What was I doing? That happens quite a bit for us with ADHD, and it happens to normal people too, but it happens way more often when you have ADHD. So, so this is why we tend to blank out a lot, or lose our train of thought, or all these different kinds of things. So I've actually been somewhat blessed. On my father's side, we actually have a very good long-term memory. This has helped me a lot in school because I didn't have to generally study too much. As long as I have some sort of like mental trigger, I can remember a whole bunch of stuff. So like I'm taking a test and a question pops up. If he went over it in class, I can generally remember what he said as long as I wasn't completely spacing out. And that's helped me out a lot. I didn't have to take notes too often. Like I said, studying was never really much of a thing for me. So I got really lucky in that department. But that doesn't change the fact that my short-term memory is still really bad. So I honestly don't have too many tips for this, mostly just because, again, it works differently for all of us. But the best thing you can do is keep track of things as best as you can. So instead of just trying to hold it in your brain and like you lose it and oh man, it's gone, write things down, or like put them in your phone, or do make some sort of reminder for it. Do something, anything you can to just make a trigger for it, bring it back, or just keep it somewhere else. Oh man, what was the other thing I was going to say? See, this is exactly the problem. I completely forgot. So yeah, just like keeping sticky notes, making some sort of mental trigger for that kind of stuff. Yeah. Was that all I wanted to say? See, this is a full-on real example of the problem of short-term memory with ADHD. So I think that's a good place to end it. See y'all.